What's up, 4 for 4? This is the DFS MVP podcast. This will normally be a three-man show. Pat Carrain is in Vegas this week, so you just have me and Davis with you. I'm your host, Neil Orphy. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. Davis is on Twitter at DavisMatic. Davis, we're going to go position by position through this podcast. Probably going to be about an hour 15 long, so it'll be short and sweet. But before we get into the main slate, I credit Davis with basically changing the entire market. The entire best ball market, I think, was a little bit too low on the Chiefs this year until Davis launched his own YouTube channel. He was all about the Chiefs, of course, a mega Chiefs homer, but he was probably right that we were all a little bit too low on the Chiefs. I feel like all of the ADPs shot up as soon as Davis started streaming this year. Davis, do you feel vindicated after the game last night?
A true wind horse moment. But basically, the moment I started my YouTube channel, Rashee Rice's ADP started climbing up. Xavier Worthy's ADP started climbing up. Hollywood Brown's ADP also climbed up and then went back down. I mean, I think you have to feel very vindicated. They scored 27 points against what was one of the best defenses in the NFL last season. And they basically got unlucky to only score 27. Juju Smith-Schuster dropped the touchdown. They had another close call on third down. Could have been 35 pretty easily. I mean, I think most slates, when me, you, and Carrain are doing this, I'm going to imagine that we are probably talking about members of the Kansas City Chiefs once they get back into their noon home kickoffs at Arrowhead.
I think you're probably right about that. Any concerns about like Xavier Worthy's target share, anything like that, worry you at all? Or you think he's just going to be so good that it's not an issue? Probably have a better target share throughout the year.
I think players who score 2 touchdowns in their first game are probably likely to get more touches and more targets going forward than the other way. I mean, look, if you wanted to be a real pessimist, I suppose that you could invoke the name of Stephen Hill, who also did score 2 touchdowns in his first NFL game for the New York Footballing Jets. I am obviously a little bit more optimistic on that.
I don't think Stephen Hill ran the fastest 40 time in NFL combine history, and he didn't play with Patrick Mahomes. So I'm not that worried about it either.
Sanchez, I think, if memory serves.
That might be right. Yeah, definitely a very exciting start for the Chiefs. What about the other side of the game? So my highest exposed tight end this year in best ball is Mark Andrews. I only have 4% Isaiah Likely, RIP to me. How you feeling about the Ravens side of the game?
I mean, Mark Andrews, I don't think was my most drafted. I think he was my third most drafted. So, kind of roughly the same there. To be honest, I'm not really worried about Andrews for DFS. And in fact, I guess I don't know if they are on the week 2 main slate. I assume they probably are after one marquee game.
Probably.
I think Andrews, it'll be a great buy low spot for him. The route seemed fine. Against Steve Spagnuolo in his career high is 22 yards. It's pretty clear that the way the Chiefs and the way Steve Spagnuolo specifically attempt to defend the Baltimore Ravens is by bracketing, moving the safety over on Andrews' side and letting the other side of the field clear out. Now, almost bit them in the ass because Likely was absolutely killing them. And to be honest, Steve Spagnuolo has not really shown a lot of respect for Lamar Jackson in their matchups. That's kind of the way they played him. And again, almost bit them. The Chiefs were the much better team in that game.
Yeah.
But Lamar had like 3 times where he could have just killed Kansas City with honestly, just a little bit of luck.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm more worried about my lack of Isaiah Likely exposure than my Mark Andrews exposure because he was so damn good in that game. I don't think it's going to hold up. I don't think he's going to end up as like a top 5 tight end, but at least showed the promise that he could be. So that's especially after I didn't draft Trey McBride at all last year. So I do have a little bit of nerves having some flashbacks to last year.
Right there.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not feeling great about that. All right. Well, enough about last night for now. We can move on to talking about the main slate. And we'll go quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends. Maybe we'll talk about defenses briefly. I don't know, but we'll go through some of our favorite plays at the main positions, starting with quarterbacks. And I'll just throw it to you open-ended at the quarterback position. Do you have anybody that you're targeting for large field GPPs this week?
So it's pretty interesting. The projections effectively, I mean, this is true on 4 for 4. This is true in the blended optimals. They're very high on Anthony Richardson, very high on Jaden Daniels. Those 2 guys are going to be, one or both of them will be that's going to be about 60% of the ownership in cash games. And that's basically how I start thinking about a slate is I think, okay, what is the cash game build? So about how much are people spending at quarterback? About how much are people spending at running back? Is it a spend up at running back, a spend down at running back? Where is the skeleton key? Is there a cheap wide receiver? Is there a $3,200 tight end that's going to be 17%? And so if you start to think, okay, well, we've got Richardson at about 15, 18% ownership. We've got Jaden Daniels relatively high, 5 to 10%, kind of depending. It's like, okay, well, how good of a play are those guys? And the interesting thing is both of them are kind of bad plays for tournaments because you'll likely be pairing them with someone. But let's say Richardson gets 28 DraftKings points, 30 DraftKings points, or 25 FanDuel points without. Well, FanDuel has the bonuses now, so we'll include the bonuses. If you're pairing them with someone, how often does Richardson or Daniels break the slate at quarterback and bring a wide receiver along with them? That is where, and maybe you just play them naked. Maybe that's the answer. I think it's probably not. So I'm honestly kind of not playing those guys in my stuff right now.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is, especially for GPPs. One thing that I've learned over the years, and I used to play naked quarterbacks all the time. Alex Baker, awesome, one of the greatest DFS players of all time, basically, talked a lot about over the years about not playing naked quarterbacks just because you really want to limit the number of things you need to get right in these large field GPPs. So while I'm often tempted to play like the super cheap rushing quarterback naked, not worry about a stack. He's sort of advised against doing so, playing naked quarterback. So over the years, I've been less and less inclined to play those types of quarterbacks naked, even though you can obviously see like the projection for a Jaden Daniels type would be a lot of fun to play him naked. So I think I'm with you that I would rather play quarterbacks that I feel comfortable stacking. Maybe I will play them a little bit anyway. Davis, do you play cash at all?
I do play cash. Yeah, I play about 800 to $1,000 of cash a week. And I play anywhere between 10 and 15 tournament teams, kind of just depending on how I feel. I run projections, obviously, for cash. And then I have a couple different projection sites that I check for, optimal. I run, create a lineup, run it through whatever the sim thing is, get the sim values and figure out if the teams are any good or not. Yeah. So I play mostly single entry and 3 max tournaments. Every once in a while, I'll just have time on a Sunday and rip some MME stuff, but not maxing the Millie Maker or anything like that.
I asked because I am working on the cash game article for 4 right now, and I'm finding it really difficult this week. Like I feel like there are some weeks where the core plays are just really obvious, but like at quarterback especially, I feel like the pricing is so tight. The like point per dollar pricing, there's nobody who really stands out above the rest. Have you looked at it all for this week? Have you been trying to play any kind of cash? Because I'm struggling a little bit this week.
Yeah, cash will be one of Richardson or Daniels.
Yeah.
It'll be Chuba Hubbard at running back. Probably Rashad White is the other one. Tyreek Hill, Andre Yoshibas, Malik Neighbors, your $3,000 tight end of choice. There's a good $2,800 defense. I can't remember it off the top of my head. What does that leave? About $5,000 at flex. So then you start to get into some of the combos, but it'll be like Neighbors, Richardson, Daniels, Hubbard, Tyreek. Those guys are the like giga chalk cash.
I love it that was mostly in line with what I was thinking. The one place that I was thinking about going different was 4,600 Kyle Pitts. I was a little bit tempted to just go there. That feels too cheap for Kyle Pitts. Is that my GPP brain, you think, kicking in a little bit too much?
I mean, I don't know if it's your GPP brain because Pitts is he's projected very well. Yeah. So that's really just reading the projections. The thing that you have to understand is that is like sometimes the bros will IKB the projections on spots like that, where it's a guy with a pretty wide range of outcomes. And I feel like, the field is definitely going to think Kyle Pitts has a pretty wide range of outcomes in week 1.
Yeah. All right. So just a little aside there, because we're talking about the quarterbacks. That was the number one spot that I was struggling for cash. So I had to ask Davis's opinion about the cash game quarterback, get into the cash game a little bit. But I do have some quarterbacks that I find really interesting for GPPs this week. And one that I think I'm going to be targeting because I'm not seeing a ton of ownership going to the team in general. And I think it could be an absolute smash spot is the Houston Texans. CJ Stroud. Do you have any interest in Stroud? Do you think he's too expensive, on this slate where we have so many value quarterbacks, or is that a spot that you would consider going against the Colts? So I think we'll have kind of a bad secondary this year.
No, if I was only playing one tournament, like let's say I'd go register for the $100 spy, that was the only team I was playing for the whole week. It would be CJ Stroud, it would be Nico Collins, and it would be Tank Dell, and I maybe or maybe not use an AD Mitchell bring back. So AD Mitchell is I gotta pull it up. I think he's 3,900. He
38,
is.
I want to say, yeah.
He's gonna have a very wide. He's gonna have 38. So he's gonna have a pretty wide range of outcomes, from running fewer routes than Alec Pierce to being the big slot wide receiver with Josh Downs out and like stepping in immediately to a 22% target share. And that feels pretty attainable to me. But Stroud, it's the dome game. You're going to get a little bit of an ownership discount because more people will be playing the quarterback on the other side. He's 7,500. He doesn't run. But I mean, the thing that I like about guys like Stroud or Kirk Cousins or quarterbacks like that is their nutted games, the games where Stroud is the optimal quarterback. There's no guesswork at all. They're bringing a minimum of two guys with them in the winning lineup, and probably they need to be pushed by the other team. Like Mahomes actually doesn't make optimals all that often. It's kind of one of those funny things. He doesn't run. But when Mahomes makes optimals, it's always with two guys, That's kind of the way I think about it. So Stroud, despite the lack of running, despite the fact that he actually is just like straight up projected for fewer points than Richardson, I think he's my favorite tournament play this week.
So we are going position by position, but while we're talking about Stroud, is that a position where, like in an opto, would you force a bring back from the Colts in a Stroud lineup, or is that a double stack that you'd be willing to run out there without any kind of bring back?
So I don't really use solvers strict optimizers anymore. I mean, the way to use an optimizer is for cash games or even for single entry. Like I think if you're doing single entry, you can definitely get away with pick your favorite quarterback, pick your favorite guy with them, and then run the opto around them and kind of use that as your jumping off point. So I don't think I would if the Sims were saying, oh, like bringbacks are really good here, then I would go with that. Something I've learned from getting kind of deep in the Sims is that bringbacks are way overdone now. They used to be way underdone, but now you go and run one of these simulations and you are getting like very, very little bringbacks relative to how they're owned.
I found the same thing once I started seeing the lineups that come out as like the top lineup in Sims. It feels like it's less than 50%. I haven't actually looked closely at like the percentage of the lineups that have a bring back in it, but it was way lower than I thought it would be for large field GPPs, especially. So that is interesting. You saw the same thing. We do need to talk about the promo picture. I think Connor says, who is this guy with Neil? Doesn't look like the promo picture at all. I want a refund. That was pretty awesome, right? That the promo picture of you, myself, and Pat looking like Jay and Silent Bob. I don't know. Who did you think we looked like in that picture?
I thought I looked like Raleigh Fingers, who the kids probably
said,
don't even know who Raleigh Fingers is. But what an image, man. What a promotional image. And hey, man, it gets the people going. People, they absolutely loved it. So that was phenomenal.
I mean, I loved it. I thought it was pretty great. And I saw the picture of myself and I was like, that does look like somebody in the industry. As Shit My Money said, I thought it was maybe Graham Barfield. I don't know. It's kind of a mix. Matt Harmon is who Luis thought. I couldn't quite put my finger on, but I was like, I feel like I look exactly like somebody in the industry who's definitely not me. But I couldn't quite place who that was. And Pat just looks like he's 15 years old. Like I don't know who he looks like exactly, but he just looks like a child in that picture, which is pretty great. Josh Allen, probably another quarterback that we should talk about briefly. He does have the best projection on the slate by 3 full fantasy points.
By a lot.
A little bit tough just because I don't know who to pair him with. And we'll talk about wide receivers later, but is that a big enough factor for you that you're just not going to play Josh Allen because it is tough to decide who you want to play him with?
I mean, I think there's really two guys. I think it's Kincaid, which is what the optimal probability would suggest. Kincaid, depending on which projections and which optimizer you're using, is either the top optimal probability tight end or the second one behind McBride, who's on the other side. Or I think I'm comfortable enough, and I didn't start out best ball season this way. You might relate to this, but I was like not in on Khalil Shakir but the offseason kind of just all went his way. The beat writers were pretty high on him for most of it. Just all kind of drifted Khalil Shakir's way. And especially with Curtis Samuel missing like the last 2 weeks of training camp with the toe injury, MBS made the roster. So just like a pure sacrificial guy. And actually you'd be more worried about Shakir if Keon Coleman was on the field, but Keon Coleman won't be on the field because it's probably going to be Mac Hollins. So it's going to be a bunch of guys. It's, MVS, Keon Coleman, Mac Hollins, guys like that, a bunch of guys who can't earn targets out there with Shakir. So that's a pretty big plus for him.
That's interesting. So you're not expecting Keon Coleman to play. That's been something I've been going back and forth on. I was just writing my GPP breakdown for before we got on, and I was thinking that Keon Coleman, the latest that I read, suggested that he might be on the field somewhat. I don't know. It's really tough to know what to do week one with rookies, like how much of a role he's going to have. Did you read something to suggest he's not going to be on the field? Is that just kind of your read on what happened in the preseason?
So I definitely think he'll play. Like Buffalo is not historically a team that, they're not like the Bengals or the Rams where it's like, these are our dudes and these dudes play 95% of the snaps. So I think he'll be on the field, but I'm not anticipating him, running 70% of the routes or anything like that. Like I bet Hollins plays more snaps than him in this game, particularly because, I actually think Arizona can win this game outright, but that's more like hot takey. The market-based stuff is they're the second biggest favorite of all of week one. So the market is saying this should not be a high Johnny Allen pass attempt, or Josh Allen. Just read Johnny Munt in the chat. They should not be a high Josh Allen pass attempt game. I think if you're playing Allen, you just single stack him. I don't think you have to do a bring back. Obviously Marvin Harrison Jr., McBride. I think even Dortch, like non-meme, Dortch actually is good on DK this week, I think.
Short King Summer, baby. As far as the Cardinals go, I was a little bit, the 20.5 implied team total was a bit lower than I was expecting for the Cardinals. Of course, I had just listened to ADP chasing earlier this week when both you and Pat were really low on members of the Cardinals, which was, I didn't love to hear because I've been super high on the Cardinals all off season, and then we see the low total this week. Are you thinking about playing that side of the game at all? Are you going to play any Kyler this week?
Yeah, so that's like my hot take of the week is Kyler and McBride, Kyler and Dortch, Kyler and McBride with Khalil Shakir. Kyler has not been healthy for real. Like we haven't seen like a full season of healthy Kyler since 2021. It's been a long time since he just got through a full season of full health with a real wide receiver. Kyler Murray had a 7.9 YPA and 881 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns with AJ Green as his second most old AJ Green, like not prime AJ Green, bad AJ Green in 2021. So I just like kind of the way I think about week one DFS is actually sort of similar to how you think about DFS, just like you want to get good prices on guys relative to what you think their future production is. And I just think this is, a $6,400 price tag. He's the same as Trevor Lawrence. For his career, he averages like 4 more fantasy points per game than Trevor Lawrence.
Right. It is insulting to Kyler. Yeah, I'm kind of into Kyler this week. It is a tough matchup with the Bills, but I still think he could be fine against the Bills. So I think I'm with you on Kyler this week. Billy, this is exactly what it says. I'm a minute or two behind, but the promo pick looks like someone doing a bad job with an AI prompt. That is how that promo pick came to be.
For sure.
That's what Elise told me. He sent it to me, and he was like, "Look at this hilarious promo pick." And I was like, "I need to share this with people." But yeah, that was an AI prompt promo pick. Any other quarterbacks that you are super interested that you think we need to talk about? For GPPs?
Well, I'll tell you the two guys that when I ran Sims earlier, I was like, no chance do I play those guys. And then they both end up having good games. And I come back and I review lineups and I'm like, well, I guess maybe I should have played them. The first one was Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones in the sim I ran was the number 2 optimal probability quarterback. I think 2 things are feeding into that. The first is a running quarterback with no ownership, like none, like legit, probably sub 1%, with one of the top projected wide receivers. Like that probably never happens. How often is what is he, 5,400, 50 something like that at
52
quarterback
on DraftKings. Yep.
So a cheap quarterback who carries a 30-yard rushing projection with a wide receiver who's projected as like the second or third best play of the slate. I mean, that like never happens. And then the other one is I fudged a projection for Justin Fields because I'm pretty sure he's going to start.
Yep.
And I mean, it's Friday and people are about done with their DFS content for the week. But if he starts against Atlanta, I mean, he's probably the best play of the slate. I would think.
It would be wheels up for Justin Fields for sure at that point. What is his price? I actually haven't looked at his price tag because
so he's not in my sheet because he doesn't have a projection.
Mine either.
I'm pulling it up right now.
Because that could be he might end up being the cash game quarterback if he is cheap.
I mean, I would assume.
And he starts.
I don't know. Let's guess. This is a good game.
Right,
I'm gonna guess he is flat 5,000. But the thing is they might have anticipated this.
Yeah, because the contest was put out a month ago when it was still a competition. So I'm gonna guess 5,400.
I was right.
Flat
5,000. 5,000. Yeah.
Yeah, if he starts, he probably ends up becoming the cash game quarterback. Definitely somebody. But then we go back to the conversation we had earlier about like playing quarterbacks naked when they are cheap rushing quarterbacks. Do you think you would play in a large field GPP? Like, would this be an exception for you where you would play Fields without any stacking?
What I would do is I'd use a Falcons player. I'd use Pitts or London. Basically, I think would be the way that I would think about it. Yeah, I mean Fields. Like, I guess I don't think Pickens is as good as DJ Moore is. Obviously, the Fields Moore stuff won people millionaire makers last year. That could be bad. I mean, I suppose it depends on if Pickens is going to be a 1% owned play regardless of what happens with Fields, then probably he's a jam. But if like that pairing, we get to Sunday morning and it's more like 5% Pickens, 8% Fields, then I'm probably off of it.
Yeah, but you would still play some Fields naked with a bring back from the Falcons.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I think because I think the key is you have to make Arthur Smith play the game. Like right. if the Falcons are not scoring at all, like Justin Fields is getting 9 points handing off to Jalen Warren and Najee Harris.
Yeah. Elite quarterbacks. I mean, I shouldn't say elite when I'm thinking about Tua has one of the highest implied team totals on the slate. The Dolphins got off last year to an incredibly fast start. Like through their first 6 games of the year, they put up like 37 points per game. I mean, that's sort of insane. But I think Mike McDaniel is a type of coach where like it wouldn't be that shocking if they come out of the gates just absolutely shocking people again. Do you have any interest in Tua against the Jaguars this week?
I mean, you know what you're getting into. It's like, sure, if Tyreek scores 37 points, then Tyreek probably has a pretty good chance of being the top optimal quarterback. I'm not going into the slate being like, oh, that's what I got to do or anything like that. I think it's fine. I might even rather play Lawrence and hope to pip some rushing, like get like 40 yards rushing and be like, okay, I'll do Lawrence with Gabe Davis and Tyreek Hill. Yeah, it's like Tua is. I mean, it's such a cop-out answer, but to me, it's like, well, if the Sims say Tua is a good play, then he's a good play.
He's just so expensive, and there are so many cheap quarterbacks on the slate who project pretty well that don't project all that differently from Tua. So I don't think he's going to be like a great optimizer play. Will come in probably sort of relatively low ownership. What do we have? 4% projected ownership at 4 for 4. So at 4%, I feel like I kind of like it as a play, as a like sort of pay up to be contrarian option. But yeah, not like somebody that I'm jamming. One more. I'll throw one more name at you. Baker Mayfield. I feel like because he's playing the Commanders. I mean, we saw last year with that was a game that Fields and DJ Moore absolutely ate up that Commanders secondary. I feel like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Baker Mayfield has a shot to just break the slate. Do you have any interest in Baker Mayfield on the slate?
No. I mean, I think I clicked him a couple times in Battle Royale.
Okay.
But yeah, no, not. It's like his path is pretty thin because if that game's high scoring, if that game is kind of what you need, then Jay Daniel's going to score so many more points than him. It feels like.
All right, we're going to move on to running backs, but since you brought up Battle Royales, I got to ask: have you gotten your sweet rake back bucks from Underdog?
I did just get $331 back from our friends at Underdog.com. Beautiful.
Very fun.
Glad to have it. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be fun for the weekend battle royales, getting a little bit of an influx of cash there. All right, let's talk about some running backs. And again, I'll just throw it to you open-ended to start. Are there any running backs that stand out to you on this slate as going to be smash plays for you in GPPs?
Yeah, I mean, I just like don't even care what Devin Achane's ownership percentage is, honestly. The Dolphins are down to Malik Washington somehow picked up a quad injury. I wish I would have known that the last week of drafting best ball teams, but they're down to 3 wide receivers that have been on the team before, with Braxton Berrios being the third and Grand Dubois, who they just pulled off the Packers practice squad. So I basically I think Achane is going to function pretty heavily as a pass catcher. I thought that this year anyway. But as long as Mostert is healthy, I think that's how they're going to kind of plan on getting Achane. Not that dissimilar to what we just saw with Derrick Henry and Justice Hill last night. Mostert is the Henry, albeit a more explosive version, and Achane is the Justice, much more explosive and capable of lining up. So to me, Achane, Kenneth Walker, just absolutely my 2 favorite plays of the slate.
Yeah, very, very nice. I see somebody in chat asking if we are answering questions from chat or not. Probably not a ton, unless you're asking about DFS specifically. So when you're asking start sit questions, there are a lot of those shows on the 4for4 channel. This is a podcast, so it's also going to be for audio listeners. I'll do my best to occasionally check in and answer any, but this is a DFS show, so for the most part, we will answer DFS questions on the show. Probably not a ton of start sit season long type questions. All right, so you have interest in Achane. I was kind of thinking Raheem Mostert himself is actually looking like he's going to be very low owned also on this slate. And I kind of wonder if we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit with Achane. I'm with you. I'm going to have some interest in playing Achane for sure, but I think he's going to end up being chalky, and Mostert might himself end up being overlooked. A guy who scored 21 touchdowns last year. Like you said, he was still super speedy last year. He's aging. Maybe he loses a step this year, but until we see it, I'm kind of interested in playing a little bit of Mostert. Do you think you're going to have any this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There's 2 things. I was writing up my stuff earlier on my Patreon for DFS, and I was like, well, there's kind of 2 rules I think you could follow this year and win, which would be play a Dolphins running back in every lineup you make and play a Texans wide receiver in every one you make. I mean, yeah, Achane I think is going to score more points over the course of the season than Mostert, but there will be 5 weeks or whatever where Mostert totally dominates him. It's just the nature of the, again, assuming, and this is DFS, so we don't have to care how healthy he stays.
Exactly.
I suppose the concern I would have for Mostert is if he isn't really operating as a pass catcher and he is just a touchdown scorer. I don't know. Is he really that much better of a play than Chuba Hubbard or Rachaad White? I mean, probably he is, because the Dolphins generate more points to their running backs. But Rachaad White is the one that's tough to handle this week, because he is the best projected points per dollar guy. But I just don't really want to play a 30% owned Rachaad White.
Yeah, I'm not super into it. And then you get coach coming out, Bull saying it's going to be kind of a play the hot hand is sort of the way I interpreted the quote from yesterday. Maybe Bucky Irving will come in and be, get more carries at some point. Doesn't seem like he's super committed to Rachaad White. So if the field's going to be there a ton, I think I'm with you. Probably not going to be super high on Rachaad White. I have to note this because it's right in front of me. I was just looking at explosive run rate, and Raheem Mostert, 6th in the league last year, 6.7% explosive run rates. That's the percentage of the time that he had runs over 15 yards when he had an attempt. But this is the interesting part. So Raheem Mostert, 6th in the league at 6.7%. Devin Achane, 12.6%, led the league, almost doubled up his teammate. That is so insane. Those numbers for Devin Achane last year. It's probably right to assume that Achane is going to get more of the workload this year. I think that's what most of us are assuming. So yeah, I think it's probably right that he's going to end up playing more, but I'm just a little bit, I'm still pretty interested in Raheem Mostert just due to kind of the lack of ownership that we're expecting there.
Yeah, I'm with you. The one thing I will not co-sign is playing them together. That's the only thing is the likelihood of them both being one of the highest of the 2 highest scoring running backs of the slate, it's definitely not 0.
We saw
but
it last year against Denver. They
it
put up
definitely
50 points
occurs
each.
in lineups more often than it occurs in the Sims. I will say that.
Yeah, I think we saw it once last year against Denver in the game where the team put up 70 points and the running backs, I think each had like 50 DK points, which is absolutely insane. The likelihood of that happening again is so low. I think you're probably right that people are going to play it a little bit too much, especially because they're more expensive now than they were last year. It's just not super likely.
100%.
Kenneth Walker against Denver seems like a pretty good bet. Just 6,100. Any interest there?
So straightforward. It's like Kenneth Walker going to get 15 rushes, 3 targets, 4 targets probably. He's going to get all the goal line stuff. Sharps is kind of just DJ Dallas plus, I think, is sort of how this coaching staff views him. And Kenneth Walker, one of the best breakaway run rates in the NFL. His success rate is actually terrible, which we don't care about unless it gets him benched. So he's like, and the thing I also like about him is he doesn't really need the Rachaad White 22 touches workload to get there.
Right.
Like he can get there on 18 runs, on 17 runs, because he breaks off 2 long ones. We've seen him do it. And this should be like a pretty obvious script for how he plays, where they're just playing downhill the entire second half.
Any interest in Javonte on the other side of it? I was kind of thinking 5,500 Javonte. I actually played some of him in some battle royales. Coming in, it looks like 5% projected ownership at 4 for 4. I don't know. The Sean Payton backfields have been so valuable for so many years when he's been the head coach. There is a part of me that is interested in running Javonte out there, just assuming he is going to be the bell cow, at least to start. Do you have any interest there?
My thought is I'm trying to make a little bit less plays like this year. Like when the conviction is low, like it's because I'm like, yeah, Javonte, I totally buy the logic. Sean Payton, he could catch 9 passes. And then you put Javonte in a sim lineup and it's like negative 64% ROI or whatever. So I'm trying to do I can't get rid of the fancy plays entirely because I always got to be a little bit fancy. But like, for example, instead of having 14 different running backs in my player pool, I'm just kind of limiting my one poorly projected guy to be Tony Pollard. Pollard is my sort of exception to the rule because my take is more it's more talent based than opportunity based. Like I think Javonte's a fine player. I think he's not the guy he was before he hurt his knee, and maybe I'll be wrong about that. But I mean, we've got a pretty conclusive sample of Pollard being the most efficient running back in the NFL. And then he wasn't last year because he gained some weight and he had the tightrope procedure.
Yeah.
But what if the tightrope procedure he's just better now? Like what if he is at training camp and he actually is who he was before? Then I want to be on that earlier rather than later.
So you like Pollard. I was thinking Tyjae Spears also he's cheaper than Pollard. It is a 50-50 split. But would Tyjae fall into the fancy plays for you, or is he somebody? I mean, he's cheap enough that I feel like he's viable just for the savings.
I mean, I think it's roughly, it's like the same thing, right? It's like you can include a couple guys like that in your pool. You can include a Tyjae, you can include a Devin Singletary, a Javonte, a Jerome Ford, but you can't be playing like 2 of those guys in the same lineup. You can't be having a running back pool of 20 guys. Like you're just getting you're giving up so many projected points versus the optimal.
Yeah, and I think you and I then fall into kind of the same trap where my player pool is usually a lot larger than other people who max the contest. When I'm probably not going to be 150 maxing this year, but when I did, I feel like I always had like one of the larger player pools because I like to include a lot of those players that it's like, oh, coming in at 1% owned. I think I like him better than 1%. I think he has better odds than that of ending up optimal. So I think I fall into kind of the same trap where there's always a ton of plays that I like. And it probably is a good idea to kind of narrow down, the strongest conviction among those weaker plays.
Right.
Any other running backs for you that fall into, I mean, either the,
we should talk about the absolute stone nuts plays before we move on, which is Bijan is I think just a great play. Matchup doesn't matter. He's the only he's the only first round running back playing on the main slate. Brees is not on the main slate. McCaffrey's not on the main slate. Gibbs not on the main slate. Jonathan Taylor, I actually like a little bit less than the projections, but I think he's fine.
Me too.
And then a name it'll be very funny for best ball bros to tune in. But Alvin Kamara, depending on where you're looking at projections, is like the 4th or 5th highest projected running back of the slate.
Third at 4 for 4.
Which is like we best ball bros completely left this guy for dead. And then you show up to week 1 to set your lineups and you're like, oh, he's just projected for 17 points. And I might play Kamara in cash, actually.
Kamara had 14 targets twice last year. That is insane. Like he was really inefficient. It was like 14 targets. I don't remember what the exact number, but it was like caught 10 of them for 2 yards per catch, something insane like that. Like so inefficient, but like it just doesn't matter if you're going to be targeted 14 times. So yeah, I think I'm with you, especially against the Panthers. Just a bad defense. Kamara is one of those plays that is just a smash. Projected for 12% ownership at 4 for 4. Looks like a very strong play, and I think you're right. Like very much in play for cash. I'll also have to put together some cash lineups, but I think he probably is in play there. Anybody else standing out to you at running back? I sort of have interest in, and this might fall into the fancy plays, but Aaron Jones. I mean, as a Daniel Jones bring back, I kind of feel like Aaron Jones makes some sense. Could be very involved in that passing game. The Vikings coaching staff has talked about how much they like him as a receiver, how much he can do as a receiver. So I think could be really involved in the passing game, and they also just might run the ball quite a bit with no TJ Hawkinson there. I guess Addison is going to play this one, so at least we don't have Addison out. But I think Aaron Jones is the most talented running back the Vikings have had, especially after Alexander Mattison last year. Kind of think he's an interesting play. Any interest there?
No, he's an awesome play. He's like a really good DFS play. Probably, actually, I want to say he was like top 6 in optimal probability when I ran stuff earlier. So yeah, I'm 100% on board. I think he's a total jam.
Love it. Okay. I just saw one more name, and now I'm trying to remember who it was. Well, either of the Bengals running backs in DFS.
Man, I obviously I wish it would be my boy Chase Brown, but it sounds like it's not going that direction. Moss, I guess the concern you'd have with Moss is just like, well, does Brown siphon off enough work that he's only like 18 points instead of 25 points? But I mean, if I played 10 lineups, I'd maybe try and do a Cincinnati running back on 2 of them. I don't know. That maybe that's a little fancy, but they're the biggest favorite of the slate against this awful team who's not going to be able to put up any points. Like the whole second half should be rushes. Yeah.
So you say you'd play 2 if you out of 10 lineups. Would it be both Zach Moss? Would you split it? How would you play it?
I think I do. I think I do one of each because Chase Brown is the more likely one to get there on explosion, which is good, for our game.
Yeah, and I don't know the signals are that clear in terms of like I know Zach Moss was listed on the depth chart as a starter, and Brown he's like the kick return or the punt return or something like that. So don't love to see that. But there were some signals at some points throughout the offseason that Chase Brown was like running with the ones he might end up as a starter. So it'll be interesting. That's one of those spots that is going to have a big impact on me. Also, I was actually pretty into Zach Moss in best ball season, but still ended up with a lot more Chase Brown because he was going later and he just felt like a great bet. So very, very curious to see how that ends up. The other name that I was going to throw at you is Zamir White. I mean, the Chargers have been a run funnel for years at this point. Now they just have a bad defense. I'm not sure that I believe in the talent of Zamir White, but also we saw last year Antonio Pierce came in, established the run right away. Unclear if that was a Josh Jacobs thing. He just really loved Josh Jacobs, or Antonio Pierce is just an established the run guy. Do you have any interest in Zamir White against the Chargers?
I mean, even his best games might not hit DK optimals because it comes with no. They have 3 other running backs on the roster, and they're all third down backs.
Yeah,
he might get 24 rushes or whatever and still not be better of a play than Aaron Jones,
Sure. I mean, that is true. If he has 24 rushes, I feel like it's got to be 100 yards and a touchdown, right? Like, and get the bonus, get the touchdown. That's the way that Zamir White gets there. But yeah, it does feel pretty unlikely.
100-yard rush games happen not nearly as much as you think.
True.
We checked it on my stream earlier this year. It's something like 3.5 per week or something, like less than 5% of games, 5% of running back games have them when you remove quarterbacks.
Interesting. Yeah, that is a good note. Probably not something we need to be factoring in for most running backs. I'm sure there are some that get there more often than others. But yeah, for most running backs, probably not a huge factor. All right, we can move on to wide receivers unless you have any other running backs that you wanted to know. I know you mentioned Chuba Hubbard as a cash game option. He's just 5,300. We know
Yeah,
they're
I
going to be
just
established in early.
if Chuba Hubbard beats me in tournaments, I tip my cap and I move on to the next slate. It is what it is.
Yep. I think that is a good approach to Chuba Hubbard. Love him for cash, but probably not for tournaments. I shouldn't say love him for cash. I'll probably tolerate him for cash is what I really mean. I don't really want to be playing Chuba Hubbard, but 5,300 feels pretty good. All right. Well, let's move on to wide receivers. Of course, we already talked about quarterbacks. So you probably have pretty good idea of some of the wide receivers that we're going to like here. But I think that there are two that you mentioned that I think are going to be like the most obvious cash plays, those being Tyreek Hill and Andre Yoshevitz. Are they also smashes in your opinion in GPPs, starting with Tyreek Hill?
I think Tyreek is. I mean, that is. You can probably speak more to this than I can, but like the kind of the number one thing you learn if you get a sim tool, you start messing around with the sims, is going to be that the best plays actually don't get played enough. The wide receiver is projected 3 points better than everyone else. Should be like 50% owned. Bijan Robinson, good example on this slate, 7,700. He's like 2 or 3 points clear of all the other running backs. He doesn't get played enough. Yeah, I mean, I think you just play Reek. Reek is a slate breaker, like 4 times a year. He's probably more likely to do it earlier in the year than later in the year. And also, I mean, the Dolphins. It's crazy they're even allowed to do this, but they stick the opposing team on the visiting sideline without the shade in 120 freaking degrees, and they make them wear their black jerseys. They wear their road whites because they can do that. And this was what happened to the Broncos, right? Is they just got baked out in that heat. It was just over for them. That's kind of like contextual stuff that you can't. I don't know how much you can weight it, but yeah, I'll probably play Tyreek on. I don't want to say every team because maybe I won't when it comes. Maybe I'll play like one Waddle without him or something. But yeah, he's the best play of the slate.
Yeah, I definitely won't play him on every team, but I think that you're right that like he's obviously just a smash. We don't want to get too cute by fading Tyreek Hill in general. Gonna be a staple in a lot of my lineups for sure. Overall, 32 teams for the week. They have the third highest implied team total at 26.25 points. That's an interesting note about the I forget that they put the opposing team in the sun. I've never actually looked at the splits because we talk about how like they, as I said, they put up over 37 points per game their first 6 weeks last year. I did not look at whether they were like mostly doing it at home versus on the road. That would be kind of interesting to look at because it is obviously hottest at the beginning of the season in Miami, where you'd think that would be more of a factor. What about before we move on to Yoshua, I got to ask you mentioned Jalen Waddle. I think Jalen Waddle is also a fantastic leverage play. I also said that like every week last
I was going to say that's just we are now fulfilling our duty as fantasy football touts by saying, oh, Jalen Waddle actually is. I mean, and he will be like twice a year, like twice a year.
Theoretically,
he will be.
Yeah.
But the other times he will not score as much. He'll limp off with an ankle injury or whatever. I don't see anything about this matchup that makes it more of a Waddle or a Reek thing. That I suppose the contextual thing I would say is maybe this is a week they could both get there together if Tua really goes nuts because Malik Washington is out. Odell Beckham is on the PUP list. They're down to Berrios and Dubois as their other wide receivers. They're thinner at wide receiver than they normally would be. I don't know how much 12 Mike McDaniel really wants to play. So maybe that gets them up. Maybe they each have a 10 target expectation, and in which case they would both be super, super strong plays.
Yeah, it's interesting the idea of playing them together because it is, I immediately think Waddle is he's the leverage play like that. And like we said, we talked about it all year last year. I don't remember if it ever like hit in a big way. I think he had like one pretty good week, but it was still not like the smash that you really needed.
Well, he had 28 in a week that Tyreek didn't play.
Oh, yeah. But then that wasn't the leverage play because Tyreek wasn't there. So, it didn't work out as much as a leverage play. But still, I think theoretically it's a great play as a leverage play off of Tyreek Hill. But I like your idea, too, of playing them together. I don't think a lot of people are going to want to do the double stack. I think 2 years ago, we actually saw that work out a few times where they both absolutely smashed. So that is definitely an interesting idea. All right.
It's probably not that good on a full slate. It's probably not that good on a 14-game slate, honestly. But it's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yoshivas, the other one that I think we need to talk about because he is the bare minimum. We have now we have Higgins is doubtful to play, so probably not going to play. And then Chase says if he plays, he'll probably be limited, but it's just a contract thing. So I don't really, that's a situation that I cannot wrap my head around. Like he's going to be limited due to his contract situation. Does that mean like, does he tell the coaches I'm not playing more than 50% of snaps? I don't really understand what he means by I'll probably be limited if I do play. But I guess we can play all the different theoreticals. I guess we'll assume that Hill is out probably, or sorry, that Higgins is out. So if Jamar Chase plays, how much interest do you have in Andre Yoshivas? And then if Jamar Chase is out, Yoshivas is suddenly the wide receiver 1, then how much interest do you have in Yoshivas?
I think he's just a good play anyway, honestly. Yeah. Like I think Yoshi is just a good play. I wouldn't say, like, sometimes we can get in these week 8 slates or whatever where there's like no value, like the salaries are too tight. Everyone who's $5,000 or below just like stinks. It's like only Patriots wide receivers. But like here we've got just off the top of my head, Jalen McMillan is 3,300. Brian Thomas Jr. is 4,700. Yep. Roma Dunze is 4,000. Jalen Polk is 3,900. There are just like enough ways to get around it that I think Yoshi at like 20%, 25%, and some of the single entry stuff I think is brutal. I mean, honestly, if T is out, I think you could say, Gesicki at 1% at tight end, or Trenton Irwin or Charlie Jones. I assume Irwin will be the other starter at like sub 1%, are probably better. But Yoshi is the best play of the group.
Yeah, he's the pretty obvious play. He won that wide receiver 3 role. Could step in, probably going to step in now to the wide receiver 2 role. There were a lot of reports about him and your guy Chase Brown were working with the same trainer throughout the offseason. The reports were glowing about how much progress they had made. So I am pretty into Yoshivas in general, but we'll have to monitor how high the ownership actually gets. I guess is the important takeaway is like if it gets up to, like you say, like 25% ownership, I feel like that would be a fade for me. I'd probably still have some because it's such a risky fade at 3,000. It's hard for it to really go wrong. That's also a play that, like you said, sometimes those value plays can be the ones that you run sims and they are in all of the top 150 sim just because it's like they can't hurt you that much. I feel like that is more the case with like the $4,000 running back than the $3,000 receiver.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see how the sims like it. I feel like the point for me would probably be 30%, where I'm like, all right, I'm going to be underweight to the field on a guy like Yoshivas. Just hope that he doesn't absolutely kill me and that there are better cheap receivers. But that's sort of a difficult number to pinpoint at this point in the week when we don't know what's going on with Jamar Chase. And then if Chase is out, like how do you play it if Jamar Chase doesn't play? Because that's where it gets really interesting. It's like, okay, now he's the wide receiver 1 and he's 60% owned. I don't know how high he would be at that point.
I don't know if Chase being out would even move his projection that much because I assume the Bengals team total would come down a little bit.
True.
And people are, mostly pretty good these days. Like bad plays don't get out of control ownership. And a lot of it is driven by projections and by content. I mean, it's kind of a boring answer, but like I'd probably just get about close to the field. I'd make a couple stands here and there where I'd very pointedly play Jalen Polk over him or something like that. Like that, the Jalen Polk's opportunity is the same. It's just on a bad team. But like Jalen McMillan also, assuming Chase plays, it's like the same opportunity. And I think Jalen Polk Jalen McMillan is probably better than Andre Yoshivas.
Great
in a good matchup too.
Yep.
The Patriots defense is not bad, but the Commanders defense should be pretty bad.
True. Yeah, it would be a great spot for McMillions. That's an interesting note for sure. All right. I guess we should probably go quicker on the wide receivers. I always forget the wide receiver is one where there's just so many playable that it takes up the most time. But we should at least talk about some of our favorite wide receivers. Do you have anybody else that you are targeting on this slate?
Yeah, I mean, Neighbors, I think Neighbors is like the mid-tier version of Tyreek, where he's like such a good play that I wonder how crazy his ownership gets. I mean, right now I'm seeing about 15%. Honestly, that even feels kind of low to me. But I would say, I mean, generational, I'm just carrying over my leverage play from best ball season, but Justin Jefferson at 5% against this Giants secondary. Oh, God. How many slates ever has Justin Jefferson been 5% owned? Like can't really be that many.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah. And then my flag plant of the slate is Nico Collins. I've got Nico Collins as the best Texans wide receiver, 3.4 yards per route run last year. I think he is the best of that group. I think he has the best ability to break any individual slate because he's going to be the deep target. He's going to be like Xavier Worthy scored 2 touchdowns last night and had 20 PPR points, I think. If Nico Collins scores 20, he's scoring like 36 fantasy points because he's getting the 100-yard bonus. It's all coming down the field. None of it is tricky, gadgety stuff at all.
Yep. Love to hear that. I'm definitely with you on Nico Collins. I'm actually also in on the other receivers for the Texans, though. And I think you said that you would play CJ Stroud in a double, most likely with Tank Dell. Do you have any interest in Diggs also? I'm Gretsch pilled a little bit on Diggs. I sort of buy into the argument of the, like, he's going to be on his best behavior on a new team, looking for a new contract, that this could just be, a big bounce back year for Diggs. Are you in on that at all? Or is that a fade for you?
No, I'm out on it relative to the market. Like I think the market was drafting him too high. I think Tank Dell's better than him. I think Tank Dell will earn more targets than him probably in a lot of games this year. But you got to be a humility based fantasy football player. And I'm also more open to being on that, being wrong on that early in the year as opposed to later in the year. Like Diggs should basically be as healthy as he should be, in as good a shape as he's going to be in. He should be as happy as he's going to be as with his quarterback play and his target distribution and everything. So yeah, I'd mix it in a little bit. Maybe if I make 3 Stroud teams, 2 of them are with Dell and Collins, and then the other one is with Collins and Diggs.
And then the other side of that game, we have Josh Downs out now. Do you have any interest in Pittman, Alec Pierce, AD Mitchell? How are you playing the Colts, if at all, with Josh Downs out?
Well, I will say, if you use our friend Derek Carty's fantasy football projections, Michael Pittman Jr. is the 3rd highest projected wide receiver of the slate. I'm probably not as bullish as Derek is.
I'm not either.
Derek's stuff really contextually weighs where games like big dome boost. These are both like the Texans defense is good, but not great. The Colts defense is probably bad. Their secondary is bad. Like this should be like a real track meet. It's gonna weight all that stuff. Very high pace of play for the Colts. I probably can't get there. Adams, I think, is strong at 7,600. And that'll be, he might be 2% owned,
he's going to be super low owned.
Yes.
With Gardner Minshew, and Gardner Minshew has supported good quarterbacks in the past, like good fantasy quarterbacks. So I'm with you definitely on Devontae. Thought I had another
Lad McConkey. This could be if he is who people think he is from looking at him, if he is just a little slot machine there, 11 receptions or something here, an Adams Lad mini. DJ Shark probably not going to play. He's not at practice today with a hip injury.
Interesting. Josh Palmer, any interest there? Or are you you're a Lad McConkey guy?
Yeah, I'm a Lad guy. Open to being wrong, but I will not be playing Palmer.
Yeah, I might play. I'll probably play some Palmer, but I don't feel that convicted in it. And then we talked about a little bit, but the Tampa Bay guys, you're into Mike. How do you rank the Tampa Bay guys? Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, McMillions. How do you feel about them?
Yeah, Evans. It was pointed out to me by my buddy Jacob Sanderson this week that the guy who ostensibly is going to be responsible for guarding Mike Evans is the skinniest player in the NFL. Emmanuel Forbes. Emmanuel Forbes was signing autographs for a high school camp this summer and got mistaken for a high schooler. It's unbelievable, awesome. Actually, that he is an NFL player, but he is. And this is a potential Mike Evans explosion spot.
Yep. No, that's definitely so Evans. Any interest in Godwin, or are you just gonna play the narrative of Mike Evans gonna grown man the defender?
Yeah, I just like Godwin's efficiency was so down last year, and he used to be an efficiency bro. So like when a second target on an offense declines in efficiency, and there's a new younger player who might be more efficient than him, that leads me to go the other way.
Okay, but McMillions is the other one that you do have some interest there.
Yeah, I think McMillions right now, Friday afternoon, he's the best salary leverage on Yoshi.
You already mentioned Romo Dunze too. Is 4,000. How much, if any, interest do you have in Romo Dunze?
Conceptually, a lot of interest. Pressing the button, not very much,
Tough.
honestly. It's just like he might run 43% of the routes.
Yeah. And I think the Titans defense might actually be pretty improved this year over what we saw last year. It's been a defense that I thought I was going to be targeting this year. I targeted them a little bit in weekly winners. And the more I read about it, I'm like, man, I'm not that confident that it's actually going to be a bad defense this year. I think they might be much improved. So it makes it a little bit tough to really want to play a ton of Odunze. Any other receivers you want to talk about?
No, I think that is, I think that should do it.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through them. Nobody's jumping out to me as, I guess, DeAndre Hopkins might miss time. Calvin Ridley, like he's somebody that I faded all offseason in best ball, but I'm like kind of interested in DFS this week. I might play a little bit of Ridley just because we're gonna have DeAndre Hopkins probably out, but I don't know. I don't feel that great about it. It feels a little bit fancy.
That feels overly fancy. Just kind of
Yeah.
everything. I will say the Sims do like Caleb. I don't see what they're seeing. So I guess I need to get further into the matrix.
Yeah. All right. Well, then let's move on to tight ends. I brought up Kyle Pitts as he's 4,600. That feels too cheap to me. Actually, we skipped over Drake London 6,000. I think is also somebody we could have talked about. New offensive coordinator, new coaching staff, new quarterback. Everything looks better for Atlanta this year than it did. So we were drafting Drake London at the 1-2 turn. He's only 6,000 on the slate. He seems like a pretty decent play. But then Kyle Pitts at 4,600. I feel like they're similar in a lot of ways plays. Like they're just a little bit too cheap for the situation this week. Not the best matchup with Pittsburgh. What are you doing with I guess we could talk about Drake London if you want to also, but Kyle Pitts in particular, how much interest do you have there?
I mean, you don't win a martingale by leaving the table. The only way to officially to win a martingale is to keep placing wagers, and I plan on continuing to place wagers on Kyle Pitts. I mean, if Kyle Pitts has 104 yards and a touchdown in this game, what will his ownership be? What's the minimum ownership on him for the rest of the season? It's like people have been waiting for this for 3 years. They are going to be pent up, and it's all going to get let out.
Yeah, no, Kyle Pitts is going to be a slam play if he does anything this week. We are all going to be a little bit too excited, especially depending on, the price tag obviously is a factor, but if he's still under 5,000 next week after having a blowout spot, he's just going to be, everybody's going to be playing Kyle Pitts everywhere. And I will continue to martingale him also. I have been wrong so many times. I'm ready to be hurt again on Kyle Pitts. So definitely on the same page there. Any other tight ends that stand out to you as players you really want to play this week?
Yeah, Ingram is very strong, full PPR on DraftKings, but a little bit overpriced. I probably prefer Kincaid, despite Ingram is actually projected a little bit better, but like specifically for tournaments, I feel like Kincaid's ceiling is better. McBride is a great combination. I mean, he's the most expensive tight end of the slate.
Yep.
You kind of always see a little bit of sticker shock there. I will definitely make, if I'm doing 10 teams, one of them is going to be a Bowers team, a Brock Bowers team, absolutely locked in. And how about our old friend Zach Ertz returning?
Oh God, don't make
Zach Ertz is going to get 6 targets this week. There's nothing anyone can do about it. It is going to happen. And the aforementioned Mike Gesicki. I mean, he's $3,000. I don't think anyone would bet their life that Gesicki gets targeted less often than Andre Yoshibas. So
I think that's a really strong call. He is not something that had occurred to me prior to this show, but man, if with Higgins probably out, with Chase potentially limited, like they're going to need to throw the ball somewhere, and might be Gesicki. So I love that call, especially filling a relatively thin tight end position this week. We had Andrews and Kelsey go last night. We've got Kittle on the Monday night. It just feels like a lot of the better tight ends, Dallas Goedert tonight, a lot of the better tight ends are not on this slate. It's a little bit thin. So if you can get Gesicki at $3,000, potentially low ownership, maybe it comes up with
it'll come up some. Yeah. But not a ton. Juwan Johnson, another one where never an exciting name, but like probably the third wide receiver on the Saints, probably runs 75% of the routes or whatever.
Jonnu Smith is somebody, Mike McDaniel has said like what we saw last year is not necessarily what you're going to see this year. He loves Jonnu as a yards after the catch kind of guy. Any interest in playing the Dolphins? Also a great leverage play on all the Tyreek Hill.
I was gonna say I feel like Jonnu is almost maybe kind of the secret play of the slate, where you've got to be you got to know a lot of ball to get to Jonnu Smith. I think because he's gonna project for about 5 points.
Yeah,
and the Sims are not gonna like that play. The Sims are gonna say that's dog shit. But I'm probably pro Jonnu. Feels like the most likely thing to do when all your wide receivers is out is use your backup fullback. How about him being listed as backup fullback on the depth chart and just kind of get him on the move? I mean, I think they very specifically wanted to get a tight end like Jonnu, not a guy who you want to play 100% of the snaps, but just a guy who can play tight end and move a little bit and earn some targets, because Smythe, good blocker, I'm sure a great locker room guy, whatever, but just cannot earn targets when he's on the field.
No, yeah. Jonnu definitely feels like he could be a new thing, could be a thing for Miami. Not necessarily. Obviously they don't need to use their tight end, but the fact they went out and got Jonnu the way they're talking about it, I'm at least intrigued by it early in the year until we're proven wrong about it, until we see that he's just not going to be a thing. I'm going to have a little bit of interest in Jonnu. Mr. Grayford brings up Johnny Munt. Any interest in low price Johnny Munt with TJ Hawkinson out? I
don't think I can get there. I think, I mean, I get it. He'll get a little bit of ownership. I mean, Johnny Munt is just like a long time blocker.
Yeah.
Because I think Tunyon is hurt too. So it is literally just down to, this is a good question. I wonder if I can recognize any of the other Vikings tight ends. Oh, Josh Oliver. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nah, he just won't run enough routes. Because that's the thing. Even with all those other guys out, Oliver and Muse will play some enough to be annoying. And it's not like Johnny Munt is a big target earner.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. He's not somebody that stands out to me in a 150 set. I'm sure I would get there, but he's not somebody that I'm like targeting this week. See any other tight? I mean, Taysom at 4,300. He is the guy that we're all playing like in DraftKings best ball. He was like the tight end. Take him at pick 120. So he's tight end eligible on this slate. 4,300. Any interest in Taysom?
Maybe like he's like a Millie Maker play. He's like he's like a true
at
like
best.
you could do 5% of him, and you could do worse. But like in the type of stuff I'm playing, no shot.
I guess he's playing against Carolina. He projects 4-4 hasn't projected for 9 fantasy points, 6% ownership. That's a higher projection than I would have guessed for Taysom Hill. It's hard for me to envision him like absolutely smashing. I guess we've seen it before, but like he just doesn't catch the ball enough. He's definitely not going to like 100-yard bonus
score twice. One doesn't do it. He'd have to score twice, which I mean, like he could for sure.
He's done it before. Yeah, it's certainly within the range of outcomes, but yeah, probably not going to be a huge target for me. All right, any other tight ends you want to talk about?
Looking here. All right, last one I'll throw out is Hayden Hurst. If you're doing Herbert, Hayden Hurst could definitely run 82% of the routes, something like that. I mean, we'll see. I don't know, but yeah, probably that's probably the definition of getting too fancy.
Yeah, no more Donald Parham there. It's at least, I think it's a viable play for sure. Projected for 3% ownership, only projects for about 5 fantasy points. But at least interesting. Kate Otten, I guess 3,800. We're gonna be slamming all of the other Tampa guys. Maybe he's a solid. Or I guess we're not slamming all of them, but sort of interesting play at 3,800. Not projected for a ton of 2% projected ownership. Runs all the routes. I don't know. He had one or two good games last year.
He had one super smash last year
in the playoff weeks, right? Fantasy playoffs.
Yeah. But no, I can't. I don't think I can get there. I mean, it's like fine. It's not like I'm saying it's bad. It's just he nothing about that matchup is leaping out to me. It's like, oh, I got to get this guy in.
Yeah. And then finally, defenses. If you're like me, you probably don't give a ton of thought to defenses. Honestly, I have not thought about it at all on this slate, but maybe you've given it more thought than I have. Do you have any particular defenses that you're targeting this week?
I do think it is worth probably trying to like get some Bengals ones, because if
Yeah. Oh yeah. Jacoby
If
Brissett.
that offense is as bad as I think they're going to be, then it's going to be very, very problematic for the Patriots and for the rest of the field for them to how many they're going to score. And then the Vikings are $3,600 against the Giants, but Brian Flores is like a sadist, man. He gets so much pleasure out of making quarterbacks' lives difficult, and Daniel Jones is already pretty good at making his own life difficult. So yeah, I think they're high priced defenses. I guess if I had to punt one, probably the Chargers, maybe. Oh, the Texans. The Texans at 2,700 against Richardson. Eat some sacks. Yeah, that'll be the one that people play in cash probably.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call. I think they're actually going to be a pretty good defense this year. I'm anticipating the Texans are going to take a big step forward, be pretty good. So I like that call. The Falcons are sort of interesting to me, especially if Justin Fields starts. Like just from like they're going to get 4 sacks if Justin Fields starts. Maybe they get a takeaway. So I think the Falcons are very much in play. I mean, with Russ too, I think they're just a solid enough defense. But yeah, I don't really have any other major defensive thoughts. All right, so we've made it through all of the positions. I think we don't have anything else to talk about on this slate. So tell me, do you have any other content coming up this weekend, Davis? Anything coming up next week? Where can people find you?
Yeah, I will be live on Sunday morning, probably right about 10 a.m. Central Time, and I will just be probably 9:30 Central Time. I'll just be vibing, setting lineups. I'll work through my cash team, all that stuff, answer lineup questions, do all that good stuff, and yeah, man, it's gonna week 1, dude. I can't believe it. We're really here.
I'm so excited. Thank you for referencing Real America Time. I appreciate that. Then I don't have to translate it in my mind to from fancy East Coast elitists. I'll be going live on my own channel later. But the big thing that I need to shout out is I will be publishing tonight. I have a GPP article coming out and a cash game article, both coming out on 4for4. I'll be posting those on my Twitter at PlayerQDFS. But you can find them on the 4for4 page. I've been working on it for like 24 hours, working on my GPP article, going game by game, talking about some of my favorite plays to target for MME. And if you're playing 150, and also my favorite plays that I'm actually targeting if I'm only playing like 20 or fewer lineups in the GPP article, and then cash, obviously just some of the best cash game plays on the slate. So those will be coming out later on the 4for4 channel. We will be back next week, week 2, with Karain. We'll be back from Vegas. Hopefully not still hungover next week when he joins us for the week 2 show. But yeah, looking forward to doing this show throughout the summer. Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast feed. Give us a like, give us a review, all that good stuff. Thank you guys very much for hanging out with us, and we will catch you next week.